Welcome to Under the Flat Hat with Chris Burnett and Kevin Heatley. Stories from the front lines of America's public lands and the people who care for them. Honest, unfiltered, and straight from under the hat. You're listening to Under the Flat Hat, a podcast exploring the people, politics, and pressures shaping America's public lands. I'm Chris Burnett, a former National Park Ranger, whiskey distiller, and federal land manager turned attorney. I'm joined by my co-host, a national conservation leader, former National Park superintendent, and an example of why the administration should extend the border wall around New Jersey, Kevin Heatley. Together, we share stories, shine a light on hard truths, and celebrate the resilience of those working behind the scenes. Whether you've worn the flat hat or just care about the future of our parks and public lands, this is your place to listen, learn, and connect.
So Chris, how you doing today?
Doing great. This is kind of exciting. This is our first episode. Uh, you know, we've tried to do this a couple times in the past so far. Getting the bugs out of the tech and figuring out headphones and microphones and all that type of stuff. Um, but yeah, I'm glad we're able to get started here. And yeah, and of course this first episode, because no one um knows who we are. And
Well, you speak for yourself.
well,
I'm
you're
I'm
famous,
nationally I'm nationally famous.
yeah, you're
But
you're you're a
to our
celebrity,
to our
you
three
know.
listeners right now, welcome to the Flat Hat. Our podcast is, I'm Kevin Heatley, and we are looking to develop something that'd be to interest to the general public that deals with public lands and a lot of the insider insight into what happens in the management of the public lands. Some of the, quite frankly, what's the technical term, Chris? Bullshit that happens in the
That's pretty
management of
technical.
public lands. Yeah, that's technical. We're trying to avoid some of the acronym fetish that is intrinsic to the federal government, but we don't want to restrict this program to just federal lands or just National Park Service or the BLM, but public lands in general. So there'll be a wide diversity of topics that hopefully you'll be interested in, enjoy. And I appreciate being able to work with Chris because Chris is several orders of magnitude beyond my skill set. So he's not only more articulate and better looking, but he knows much more about public
Uh,
lands management
uh,
and federal government than I will ever. So, Chris, why don't you introduce yourself to our three listeners today?
all right. So yeah, I'm Chris. So I've spent a few years working for the National Park Service, Department of Interior, Reclamation, BLM, some other entities out there. But I think probably the most important thing for me to say right now is the reason we're doing this. One of the reasons, one, we find it entertaining. We find each other entertaining, and we enjoy talking to one another. Um, but we've both left federal service within the last year, and we can say things that the federal employee cannot. And we are not under an NDA. We are not restricted by the Hatch Act or anything else like that. So we can actually talk about what's going on um, in a manner that's not, stifled. We can tell our real thoughts on stuff. We can, you know, try to, help educate people that don't have a background in public lands or with the parks or whatever, and to get a better understanding of kind of what's going on and what these impacts and things really are. Um, when you talk about, well, the parks are understaffed, what does that mean? Well, the NPS is not going to tell you. uh, the real skinny on it. But the two of us from our different perspectives can talk about, like, you yourself, you failed to mention you were superintendent of Crater Lake. I don't believe you said that in the opening part. Um, but you could talk about how that park specifically uh, will be infected or has been affected by not just the current staffing woes going on in the current administration, but legacy understaffing and how that makes impacts. I can talk about multiple parks. I can talk about it at the Washington level. About how we will, sometimes won't even take on projects because we know there's no one to manage them, or we have someone, oh, we could, give this to, to Pat, but he's got 38 other projects right now, and there's no way he's going to be able to, do this effectively. So we're going to have to turn away $15 million, right? I mean, um, you just don't hear stuff like that um, from the service itself or from the department because they're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah,
And,
that's true, and that's I think
so
that's the where we're trying to fill a need is if you go out there, you don't see a lot of people that when once you leave employment, whether it's the private or the public sector, your free speech rights, your First Amendment rights are fully reinstated. So we could speak openly about things that other people won't, and we can give the audience the straight skinny on some of the uh, behind the scenes challenges of managing public lands. And the important thing to recognize is that these are public lands. They belong to everybody. Every citizen, whether it's the kid from New Jersey or the woman from New Mexico or somebody up in New Hampshire, these public lands, even if they're in Idaho or Oregon or wherever, they belong to the people. And you're right that our background allows us hopefully to fill that void because there's a lot of podcasts um, about the public lands that are kind of like travel logs.
yeah.
Oh, this is so beautiful. Oh, that's so
Oh, I
beautiful.
love
You
them.
should go
They're
here.
great.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah,
Yeah, but that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is say, hey, this public these public lands have these challenges and here's what's going on and here's where you can be informed and potentially make a difference and hopefully get entertained at the same time because
right, right.
that's the presentation, the information. We don't want this podcast to be a wonky, policy-driven, technical acronym laden thing that you have to actually pay attention to. We'd prefer it to be something that you tune in because you're entertained and you learn something each time. I know I do. Whenever I talk to Chris, I always learn something, and it always makes me laugh. So I mean, that's what it's all about. But you're right. I
It's that New
forgot to
Jersey
mention.
education.
Yeah, that's right. New Jersey. Yeah. It's like just full disclosure. If you're from New Jersey and you're tuning in, you won't care because if you grow up in New Jersey, you have a certain inherent affinity for making fun of the place you grew up. That's just
I
part of
do
the
the same
Jersey
thing with
culture.
the South. I'm from
Yeah.
Southeast Tennessee, and I've lived all over over the country, and there's a lot of Southern jokes, in my repertoire.
Yeah, there's some I
Mm.
loved. I worked all throughout the United States and the South. It's a different culture, and it's the people tended to be much more open and friendly. I'd go down and I'd be working on a project in the South, and within the first day, somebody I just met be asking me to go fishing. And that was some of the best times I ever had working professionally were in New Orleans. New Orleans was
Mhm.
fantastic. I still have friends. I just talked to one of the guys. I haven't seen him in 15 years. Just talked to him yesterday about one of the projects that came up in the news, which I think I forwarded to you. So,
Mhm.
full disclosure to our listeners. When my background, as Chris indicated, yeah, most recently there was a lot of media attention because I resigned from my position as superintendent of Crater Lake. And we can talk more about that so that I can clear the air
Well,
on that. Because,
that's actually the highlight or one of the highlights of our second segment.
okay,
So
yeah, I can hold off on that because if there's
Well, we're
one
about
thing
ready for it.
everybody everybody loves to do is talk about themselves. So that,
All
and this will
right.
be the only episode I otherwise I will become a man of mystery, and I will no one will know what I'm about, where I am, or how I ended up on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm just looking at our notes to see if there's anything from our welcome and introduction section that we needed to add. I think we hit everything,
Don't
so I
tell the
think that's
audience.
good.
Don't tell the audience
Well, I'll just
you're
edit it
looking at
out.
notes. I,
I'll
I
just edit
my
it out.
my stuff is fully improvised. I don't have any notes. I don't know what I'm saying half the time until I say it, and that's what's
And half the
causing me.
time, you don't even know what you're saying after you say it.
Yeah, and then people that listen to me have no idea what I just said. Yes, sir.
Right. So in this segment, what we're going to do is, I thought we would. It's almost like an icebreaker, right? Uh, I will interview you for a few
Good
minutes,
metaphor for Crater Lake. Yes.
and then after that's done, you'll interview me so we can, ask some of the, questions that uh, we think are important about each other.
Sure.
Um, and then obviously the way we ramble, it'll go longer than what we initially planned for, and that's fine.
Right.
I kind of hope so. It makes it more interesting and fun. And
Sure.
then,
It's more genuine and
yeah, yeah.
improvisational and more fluid.
All right. So I'll go ahead and start. We'll title this little segment "Host Interviews."
Yeah. Don't call it icebreaker because we do not
Oh,
want Christy Nome coming and trying to shoot our dogs or something. We don't want.
oh gosh.
Don't call anything icebreaker. That's a bad idea.
We're not even
No,
10 minutes into our first episode, and you've already got ice coming after us.
yeah, we already have
Um,
ice. Hey, Chris, somebody's at the door. Hold on, I think it's a package. Yeah.
all right. So the first question I had was, I make fun of you a lot for being famous. And, it's because of your decision to step down as superintendent at Crater Lake. So what I thought the first question would be, could you fill in our audience on what happened, why you decided to take that step, and what that meant to you?
Yeah, so I was most recently the superintendent of Crater Lake National Park, which is in Southern Oregon. And Crater Lake National Park is a phenomenal park. I recommend everybody put it on their bucket list. Every American citizen should make a pilgrimage at one point or another to Crater Lake. It's just spectacular. And it's much more than pretty scenery. Crater Lake, which is more properly termed Giwas, which is the name of the Klamath people, that for thousands of years it was called Giwas, and we just decided to call it Crater Lake. Um,
Thanks for putting that
so
in there, by the way.
yeah, and that's another episode altogether. But I don't call it Giwas just to, you know, give recognition to the indigenous people. It really should be called that. That's the real name of it. If somebody calls it that for thousands of years, that's what it should be called. You just don't come in and change that unilaterally and disrespect the people that it's a sacred place to, still is a sacred place to, and rightly so. Nobody goes to Crater Lake and doesn't have their jaw drop open and have some kind of an emotional reaction, or if you want, a spiritual reaction to the site of Crater Lake. It really is. It can be transformative to if you really hit it at the right time. Anyway, I was working as a deputy chief, and that's how I know Chris. He was my budget officer when I was a deputy chief, working BLM headquarters, working under the planning and policy development, and that was a phenomenal job. However, I did read Project 2025 about a year ago, last April, so a year and a half ago now, and realized that BLM was going to be targeted for significant changes and basically disrupted to the point where its functionality would be severely compromised. And that happened during the first Trump administration. So there was no reason to expect it would be any different. I mean, it would be an idiot that didn't recognize that, what happened the first time where they lost I think it was close to 90% of their Washington personnel when the first Trump administration devastated the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM. Uh, 5, 6 years later, they still had not replaced most of those people because it's not easy to get people into those positions that have the skill set necessary. Anyway, I was working as deputy chief, read Project 2025, decided I better make a contingency plan to survive the dismantlement of the BLM headquarters staff, and jumped over to the National Park Service with the expectation that the National Park Service would be a refuge, that even the Trump administration would be hesitant to dismantle a beloved institution like the National Park Service. In general, the American public loves national parks and loves the National Park Service. I grew up loving the National Park Service and having a sense of deep respect for the science and the professionalism and the stewardship that the National Park Service brings to our national parks, these iconic places in the United States that belong to everybody. So when Crater Lake became available and they offered me the position, I was honored to be selected, and I didn't hesitate. I took a significant salary cut to go to Crater Lake, a significant salary cut, but I figured it's going to be a more stable situation under the Trump administration. And who doesn't want to work at Crater Lake or one of these other phenomenal national parks? As you've mentioned many times, Chris, that one of the sayings they have is people say, "I get paid in scenery," because the compensation isn't what you're going after. It's the it's the experience of being involved in those landscapes and managing
Right, right.
those locales. Um, However, immediately after the administration took over, and I started Crater Lake about a week or so before the inauguration. Immediately after that, the onslaught began. The constant disruption, the freezing of hiring, the freezing of purchasing, the open disrespect for the federal employee, where federal employees, the, depends on uh, you know the listening audience, but the federal employees were openly disrespected, told that there are positions, and this was official communications that came down not through the National Park Service, but came from Office of Personnel Management or DOGE. And when DOGE communicated, it was anonymous emails that came in that you're like, who at DOGE is sending this? But the federal employee was told openly, and this is, hundreds of thousands of people were told that the success of the American enterprise, and I'm paraphrasing now, but is dependent upon productive private sector jobs as opposed to unproductive public sector jobs. That's something they said to all the public sector employees. Who the hell does that? Who does that unless they're openly trying to get people to quit? And my primary responsibility, and I spent most of my career in the private sector, came to the public sector about 10 years or 11 years ago. My primary responsibility throughout that period of time, because I was in management for 40 years, was always the health and safety of my employees. Well, you do not do that to your employees and expect that you're going to protect their health and safety. You are going to have psychological and physiological impacts on those people. And when you're dealing with a large enough population of people, you are going to get people killed. And just the stress alone from them not being respected and appreciated for the job they're doing, not being given the tools to do the job they're doing. I'll give you another example because the media didn't always get this right. Dealing with the media, and I dealt with the media in the past, so I knew what to expect. They would have a theme, which was staffing, and they wanted to tie everything back to the staffing theme. Oh, you left because of staffing cuts. So, what are the staffing cuts like, and are the bathrooms overflowing? And they didn't quite get it A couple of them did. Oregon Public Broadcasting, I did an interview with, and they did a really good job. But the primary reason I left was because I could not, in good conscience, as a manager, um, basically lead a bunch of folks that were being put under those kind of conditions because I couldn't protect them. And it's not like a paternalistic type of sheltering them from. No, that's not what it's about. It's about basic health and safety. You go and OSHA will say don't run with scissors, right? Or well, you got to have safety glasses when you're grinding metal and all, simple stuff like that. And the focus on catastrophic loss or exposure to some kind of materials that are long-term hazardous, but they do not deal with the primary driver of mortality on the job, which is stress. And so
Right,
I always
right,
tried to create a work environment that was positive, that got the work done, that was focused, that was appreciative, that was energetic, and that had a good sense of humor so that people enjoyed coming to work. And I got that repeatedly, that people did enjoy coming to work when I was in charge. And we still got the work done. And some people didn't appreciate that you had to get the work done, but that's a different story. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that at Crater Lake. So after 5 months at Crater Lake, this spectacular, iconic position in a place and a spectacular position that most people just would strive for their whole careers. I walked away after 5 months, and it was not to my financial advantage to do that. Quite the opposite. But I take it seriously, and I always have, that you got to protect your people. And I couldn't do that at Crater Lake because there was just, we weren't given the resources, we weren't given the personnel. When I walked in the door, Crater Lake was already at a 40% staffing loss. And then we were being told that when people left, which they were actively trying to encourage, when people left, we were only going to be able to hire one for every four people that left. There was no way physically. Crater Lake is on a shoestring right now, barely getting by. Things are still operational, at least they were when I left, but it's not where it was in the past. And there's things that aren't
right.
getting done, there's things that won't get done if one person slips and falls on the ice. And if there's one thing, there's a lot of at Crater Lake, it's ice. So there's a situation there that is not sustainable, and I did not want to officiate over that kind of a thing and be blamed then in the long run. Well, how did this person let Crater Lake fail? No, I didn't let Crater
Right,
Lake
right.
fail. You put it into a tailspin on purpose, and so
Well, I think part of
that's
the issue that a lot of supervisors that I talk to, including you, you know, it 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 started to cross that line from not just you're having to manage understaffed positions and you're trying to protect your people, but it turned into that you were going to have to start doing things that you did not agree with, that you did not believe were part of, you know, that that was allowed under the law, right? That
hmm
was allowed under our policies, um, allowed by the American people, right? And so, like, there's this range of things. You started talking about the understaffing, then the more understaffing, and it's going to lead to accidents, right? But then you're getting to that point, and I saw it I left in May as well, and that's where I started to see it at the headquarters level, where things are about to change to the point where I was being told to do things that were not right. And in some cases, I would argue illegal. And do you want to keep being the pawn or the shill of this administration when they're having you do things that in your heart, are just wrong?
right.
And that made the decision for me, like, I can talk about that later, but it made it a lot easier, right?
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct because that's a philosophical issue, perpetual issue. You'll hear people argue that, well, you stick with it and you try to make it better from within the situation. And I get it. I know people are economically coerced. I saw it my whole career. Most of the time, we are economically coerced to put up. We're wage slaves, and we put up with a lot because we need to keep a roof over our heads and we need to keep food on the table and we have families to provide for. So not everybody has the option to just jettison from their position and go, you can take this job and shove it. I'm not working here anymore. You, not everybody has that ability because they have responsibilities to meet. So they're economically coerced to begin with. But you're absolutely correct. There's a point where you go, oh no, I'm not going to run that train. You're putting people on that train and you're sending them to their death. I'm not running the train. I'm walking off the job. And if enough people get together and do not cooperate and do not do the work that needs to be done to implement things that you morally and ethically find objectionable, then it won't happen. And what's the old adage about, the only thing evil needs to succeed is for good people to do nothing? And that's exactly correct. And walking away, another example of the things that are just intolerable to me. We had a probationary employee. Unfortunately, it was only one. That's an employee that's still in that first year probationary period where they can be fired for a multiplicity of reasons. But
or no reason.
yeah, or no reason. Yeah, they can just go, we don't like the color of your socks that you wore today. I'm sorry, we're going to let you go. Um, well, we had an employee, as there were thousands of them, that got an email on Friday, the 14th of February, St. Valentine's Day. And I'm sure they did that on purpose to make it, the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Well, he got an email, this person, shouldn't tell you what gender, but it's too late now. But they got an email, and they were told in that email, and it came, basically from um, the OPM, which is the what is OPM again now? It's Office of Personnel Management. Yeah, see how
Right.
rapidly I'm losing. It's a good thing we're putting this stuff while I'm still cognizant of what I did. Office of Personnel Management sent out this email that said your performance doesn't justify your continued employment. Now, number one, they didn't even know this individual. They had no idea what that person's job role and expectations were. They had no idea about this person's performance. So they flat out open lied. And
Right.
this individual communicated later on. He went home that afternoon and cried. Just lost the job that he had gone across the country for, uprooted himself. He's living in, you know, a, what some people might consider substandard conditions outside of Crater Lake. He really put in an effort and doing a tremendous job. I worked with him for, uh, you know, at least a month before they got terminated, and they were a, a stellar employee. And these assholes had the audacity to lie and send out an email in mass to all these probationary employees and tell them, fabricate a reason. And I won't put up with that. That was total bullshit. That
Right.
was
Right.
one of those straws that broke at that point, and that was early on. I decided, oh my God, if this is what these idiots are going to do, is this how they're going to treat the employees? How the hell do I insulate people from this kind of abuse? Because it's nothing less than abusive. And I'm pissed. And I couldn't say this in the general media, but I was pissed. I was angry that this happened. And
Right.
we kept in touch with this individual. And thanks to the lawsuit that was subsequently filed, that individual got their job back. But
Oh, good.
that
Good.
yeah, and that was just completely unacceptable. But another example of, as you're indicating, the ethical concerns, the issue of, well, we're going to have uh, the the codes, the QR codes that people can go up to displays, historical displays, science displays, and they can go on the website. It'll take you to the website when you scan the code, take you to the website, and then you fill out why you object to the information that's being presented. Information that's vetted by technical experts, historians, information that reflects the state of the historical literature and historical scholarship on an issue. Because the National Park Service, when I grew up, I always respected how professional and objective and scientific the information was. Information about climate change, anything that offends somebody's political sensitivities, doesn't fit with their narrative, well, now you could go on and you could complain about it. And then they'd get a list of, well, these things have to be addressed. How are you going to address these things? So that's an obvious ploy by the administration to censor the science and
Hmm.
censor the history and promote revisionist history. No, unacceptable. To me, that's a sacred, you know, a sacred. Um, now I can't even think of the word now. I should have really drunk a monster before I got on the air. It is a sacred trust to
Right.
present information that's as accurate as the science and the historical scholarship um, can can come up with at the time. May change in the future with new information, but it doesn't change because somebody it doesn't fit their political agenda or their economic interests. If your economic interest is to do this, and we find out you're killing people because you're damaging the environment in some way, that information needs to come out. That's pure
Right.
simple
Right.
as that. This merchants of doubt kind of nonsense with you know, the template from the tobacco companies, which kept that information suppressed or sowed the seeds of doubt for years in order to maintain their revenue stream. That kind of nonsense is just not going to occur if I'm in charge of communicating information to the public. And so that was really um, over the top for me. When I saw they were doing that, we got that communique back in April that was coming. I was just livid. I'm like, well, no, this is unacceptable. I am not participating in rewriting history or whitewashing information. Because if there's one
Hmm.
thing at Crater Lake, and we can talk about this more extensively at a future episode, Crater Lake is world renowned for the clarity. That lake is almost 2,000 feet deep, and you can see down hundreds of feet because it doesn't have any surface water that's running off into it. It's basically precipitation and snow melt. It doesn't have any streams or creeks that run into it.
Right.
So the clarity is spectacular. Well, that clarity is at risk and is going to change and is already starting to change. Um, we've had not at the point right now, but there are algal blooms that are occurring, and again, I can get into the science about this on another episode. But the long and the short of it is the lake itself is changing as a result of warming temperatures in the winter, and that's directly a result of climate change. We're also seeing changes in the precipitation type. The amount of precipitation is fairly constant, but the kind of precipitation, the amount of ice and moisture, the heaviness of the snowfall is different than it was in the past, which is starting to destroy the historic buildings at Crater Lake. And it's having an impact on the operations because of the change in the kind of precipitation levels in the winter. Not the amount, the overall amount, but the type, I should say, the type of precipitation
Yeah.
in the winter. More freeze and thaw cycles. So, long and the short of it, Crater Lake itself is at risk as a result of climate change. Now, how are we doing justice to the American people if we do not communicate this is communal ownership of this iconic place? It's owned by all the citizens of America, is, at least it is for now, is at threat by this is the number one threat that the lake has at this point in time is climate change. And don't even get me started on the wildfire situation because that's also uh, a function
Yeah.
of climate change in addition to fuels loading.
Yeah, fuels loading. I was going to say, like, that's also a legacy of our, you know, the U.S. government's inability to look at the science and
Yes.
to do suppression over anything else. And I mean, I remember, 30 years ago, I'm in college learning about, fire and forestry and, my forestry class I took and all that. We're, talking about these arguments that have been around since this is probably another episode as well. Uh,
Absolutely.
talking about Pinchot and his you know wise use of the U.S. forest system, and but how the forest management came out of the U.S. Forest Service and was basically adopted. They set the standards for interior, um, and yeah, how we did not clear out fuels. Uh, we just in the last decade or so have started to let fires burn on the ground if they can keep them safe in order to start burning some of these fuels up. But we've seen it a couple times down in Rio Doso last year or the year before. Uh, a lightning strike fire ended up taking out half the town because they were. I think it was lightning strike, or maybe no, that was a prescribed burn. Uh,
So, in
that
anticipation that our viewership might include some folks from New Jersey, where's Ruidoso? What's that about?
So that's
Tell the
middle, like almost square middle of New Mexico.
Okay,
It's
that's
a
good. Just
little
so they know where
island.
that's at.
It's like an island of mountains in the middle of vast desert. But there's a U.S. forest, national forest there, and there was a pretty large fire that popped up. But I believe what made it kind of unique was I believe it was a prescribed burn that got out of hand, and then people all blamed the district ranger who was in charge of this fire. But one of the reasons why he was trying to let it burn was because a lightning strike would have done this eventually anyway. And if they could have, yeah, it got out of control. Everybody knows that's a mistake, but he was trying to help get rid of some of this, uh, fuel on the floor.
Now, didn't he
And
get prosecuted initially? Um, to get
yeah, I think,
arrested by the local sheriff or something like that?
yeah, then it got thrown
Yeah.
out
Yes.
later,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah,
But that's a
crazy,
whole.
crazy stuff. That's a
That's a
whole,
whole
that's like a
another
true
episode.
crime episode, what happens when you go against the
Yeah.
local county sheriff, you
And
know.
that's what the focus of this podcast is we want to explore those things in depth, and we're going to have because both Chris and I know people that are um, intimately involved at different levels of the organization, all the way to the top of some of these public lands agencies. And we hope to be able to get them on the show. We've already got a couple of really high profile guests lined up that we can interview and provide insight to some of these kind of issues that I think all the American public, anybody that appreciates public lands, anybody that appreciates going outside and getting out on the landscape is going to enjoy, hopefully.
That's our show for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Chris Burnett, joined as always by my good friend, Kevin Healy, a refugee from New Jersey, the landfill of opportunity. And to you, our listeners, thank you for sharing part of your day with us. We couldn't do it without you. You can find our merchandise, podcast notes, and other fun stuff at www.elburno.com. Elburno is proudly owned and operated by current and former National Park Service rangers, and every purchase helps support rangers and their families. A special thanks to our whole team, especially our production crew. This episode, like all the others, was brought to life by our executive producer and all-around wizard, Elise Burnett. We definitely couldn't do this without her. You can also find more about our work and bios at www.elburno.com. Before we close, just a quick reminder, nothing in this podcast should be taken as legal advice. If you need legal guidance, please consult an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It helps more people find the show and join the conversation. This podcast, along with all related merchandise, is a production of El Burno Studios, a division of El Burno Productions, Ltd.